Welcome, everybody, to Broadcast Team Alpha, where we bring you cutting edge conversation while exploring the quantum possibilities. And we are so doing it again tonight. I see that you guys are already so excited in the chat room for our really fascinating guest tonight. And we're so excited to have him. And Augie's going to tell you more about him. But I'm just going to open with gratitude. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence in the chat room. I love watching all the conversation. If you do have questions for Preston, please put them all in capital letters so I can discern them from the other chat that goes on. And thank you for your super chats. I know last week I didn't get to thank everybody, so thank you for that. This has been a labor of love for Augie and I, and it helps defray the cost of the show. So that's very kind of you and generous, and we appreciate it very much. I do want to invite you to the membership community, the YouTube membership community for Broadcast Team Alpha. That is an exclusive community where you get to know us. We have Zoom gatherings, they're not meetings, where we talk about things that you want to talk about. We recently had Jenny G come on for the community and do private readings for them. And we also put videos and breaking content back there, so you see it first. And I'm doing a spoiler alert. I don't know if it's up yet, but Augie did a video talking about his story from his heart, and it's about your dreams coming true and how you live out your dreams. But the most important part of it is really interesting. I think you'll like it, and it's worth the price of admission to see Augie, who he really is. Not a personality, not being charming and quippy and all of that, but being who he really, really is, live and vulnerable, and it's really good. So I highly recommend that you take a look at that. And I'd also like to invite you to our Sunday gathering at the Mastermind Connection. If you would like to join, you can send an email to the mastermindconnection@gmail.com. Augie will send you the link. It's 2 p.m. Eastern. And what happens there? We play in the quantum realm. We come up with agreed intentions that we want to focus on, that we want to see created in reality, right? Health, the virus changing, right? Disclosure coming a little bit quicker, weather patterns, right? Shifting them, love for Mother Earth. And sometimes we do personal ones because we're constantly, pouring from our cup for the beneficence of the world, for the universe. So oftentimes we take a Sunday off and I do a guided imagery to refill our cups, right? To empower us so that we light workers who are gathered there can keep doing what we do. So if you'd like to come, it's a beautiful guided imagery where we envision being in 5D, where we envision living in the new earth, right? How amazing it is to live on the new earth. So if you could even imagine any of those things that I'm talking about, send Augie the email and I'll see you next Sunday. Augie, please tell us about our fascinating guest.
Oh, yes, I will. This is going to be so good. But first, I got to say something about that video that Nori brought up. That is my story. Yes, it is. And it's never been told before. And maybe it is time, because there is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you will find out who I am. So what I have been involved with and done. And it is a story that it was unscripted, and I was just talking through the hole in the top of my head. I just got it out there, and I haven't even seen it after I did it yet, so maybe I should.
No,
anyway.
just post it.
Okay.
Yeah, just post it.
All right. Well, I tell you, folks, we have Preston Dennett with us. Preston, he is a legend in his own time. Man, he has written 30 books. That's a lot of books. And now he's just told us that he's putting out 2 books a year. That's phenomenal. And Preston started investigating UFOs and the paranormal some 35, 40 years ago. And when he discovered that some of his friends and family, they've had some strange experiences with UFOs and alien contact and possible abduction, some of them, but there may have been some contacts and invitations also. So it gets a little deep in there, and he's a sought-after lecturer, a guest on TV, radio shows, conferences, and shows like this. And today, we're going to start out talking about Bigfoot, the Yeti, the Snowman, or whatever other name you can come up with him. This is the big cover-up. And I use that word not lightly this time, because we can prove that it is a cover-up. And Preston is the one to talk about it, because he has written books on it, and he has written a long article with stories from people that have had contact with Bigfoot. And with that, welcome to the show, Preston.
Welcome, Preston.
Thank you, Augie. Thanks, Nori. I'm excited to be back. Yeah.
So good to have you. So good. Everybody in the chat room is so excited. And you know what? I actually would like to maybe open up with something different, because you said that you like to kind of be creative. We'll backtrack from here, but the burning question for me is, why the cover-up? Why the cover-up? It seems kind of innocent, you know, as innocent as a Bigfoot could be, but it makes no sense to me. Tell us.
Yeah, I'm actually puzzled by it myself. With the UFOs, I understand that more deeply. Yeah. But I was shocked to find out that Bigfoot evidence is being covered up as well. And I'm not entirely sure why. I think there's probably a couple of reasons. Yeah. One is that this does fly against mainstream anthropology. And scientific inquiry, is wonderful as it is, and I am a huge lover of science, is somewhat of a closed system. It builds up a belief system, and anything that does not match into the mainstream narrative gets tossed, thrown away. And we see this all the time. I was very interested in anthropology in college and was taking classes each year. And each year they were changing the theories on me. It was quite upsetting about how old modern humans were. They're like, well, we think they're 20,000. No, 30,000. No, we're going to say 40,000 years old. I think it's probably
a number.
So that's one reason, I think.
Okay.
It's hard to say exactly why, but I think there's a connection.
Do you think it's an oops, like scientifically we made a mistake, or do you think everybody just looked the other way? I don't know what that is.
Yeah, there's an element of that, I think, as well. That people realize it is real, and they're like, well, we've been denying this for so long, now we would look foolish if we were to say it's real.
Right.
And another fact is the evidence has been somewhat elusive, but only really because it's being covered up. I mean, we can dive deep into this. There are cases of Bigfoot captures. I started looking into this. Oh, yeah. People are saying, oh, why hasn't a body ever been found? Like, hold on a second. Have you looked into the UFO or the Bigfoot literature? And like UFOs, it's not just 10 or 20 books. It's 100 books a year being published on Bigfoot and Yeti and Alone and Sasquatch. It goes by different names. Mm-hmm. And if you track this literature, you will see that there are many cases of Bigfoot captures. And often what happens is these bodies are captured or taken away by military government officials. I've tracked several, and other Bigfoot researchers will echo this, to the Smithsonian Institution. They are covering it up. And I'm not precisely sure why. I think it's partially, like I said, because it flies in the face of modern science and the narrative that, there are no such things.
Wow.
But I think it's also connected to a lot of these different paranormal and UFO subjects.
Yes.
And one breadcrumb leads to another, and soon the whole house of cards will collapse.
Right. That makes such good sense. So then with the missing body, like you were saying before we started the show, that there's no DNA to compare it to, right? Any hair samples, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the evidence. And, I understand skepticism. I was skeptical of UFOs and certainly Bigfoot. And even after finding out UFOs and ghosts and near-death experiences and all of this was real, I absolutely did not want to look into Bigfoot because I suspected it was real. And I thought, this is going to open up another can of worms. This is going to take up too much time. This is going to send me down an avenue I'm really not ready to go down. But as any good scientist knows, you have to follow the evidence where it leads you. And when I got my first Bigfoot account, I'm like, fine, let's do this. And I quickly did find out it was real. And there is a vast amount of evidence. It is conclusive, 100%. It is not just eyewitness testimony. The eyewitness testimony is enough, I think, because we have tens of thousands of eyewitness testimonies stretching back well over 100 years and far beyond that. But we have hair samples. We have fecal samples. We have footprints, handprints, body prints. There are Bigfoot nests. There are many cases of DNA samples that do not match primates or humans or bears. And the problem with it is we don't have what scientists call a baseline. For example, if you want to prove something is, say, a polar bear, well, we can go to a polar bear and get the DNA from it and say anything that matches this is a polar bear. But what we don't have in the public arena, I'm going to underline that, is a Bigfoot body. Because if we did, then we could say, well, here's the baseline. Anything that looks like this, we know is a Bigfoot. And instead, we have all these different DNA samples that we can't match. And we can't say conclusively that this is a Bigfoot because we don't have the baseline to say that. But absolutely, the DNA evidence is there. And the sound recordings and photographs and very excellent footage. It's not just the Patterson-Gimlin footage, which is super well known up in Bluff Creek, where you can see a female Bigfoot plodding across this field very clearly. That's excellent footage. It's never been debunked, despite many efforts to try it. But if you look into the Bigfoot footage, it's mind-blowing. I mean, it really is. There are footprint samples, footprint cases, where there's over 1,000 footprints. Traveling in a line, stepping over huge barbed wire fences and streams and brooks with, 6-foot strides, far over what a normal human can do. It couldn't be a person in wooden shoes. There's little striations, how we have fingertips and there's little striations. That's true with Bigfoot as well.
Interesting.
And you can see these in the genuine footprint cases.
I have a theory, and could I tell you this theory? And I want to hear what you think about it, because there are several psychopathic organizations that run the world, and I think there is a religious connection here, because if we were to recognize and tell the masses of people that yes, Bigfoot is real, he is they live in families like us, and we later on got to make contact with them and brought them out and found out that they are more mentally capable than we are. They are telepathic. and they can have emotions, and they have abilities we don't have. I think the church will be scared shitless from that. What do you think?
I think you hit the nail on the head. This is one of the sides of the cover-up, because we are dealing with another species that most researchers, I'm not going to say all, but most believe is a sentient and intelligent being. We kind of look at it ourselves as being the apex of, species on this planet. And that's not necessarily true. Bigfoot, if you look at the Native American traditions, oral traditions, not just Native American, any indigenous culture across the world, has accounts of these beings stretching back for hundreds of years. We share the planet with them. We always have. So this is one of the problems. And I like what you mentioned about them having psychic abilities or being more advanced than us, certainly in some ways. Because yes, this is what many of the reporting is showing us, that these are beings who are telepathic. I've interviewed people myself who've had encounters where they had a telepathic connection or saw psychic abilities displayed in terms of turning invisible or this sort of thing. So these are beings who have elevated psychic abilities.
Wow.
And this is one of the things that is, I think, also responsible for the cover-up, because this will lead into a lot of questions about our place on this planet and their relationship to ETs as well, because we haven't got into that. But there is a big connection here with UFOs and ETs. There's 50 or 100 cases that are well-known, well-established, in which Bigfoot and UFO, the phenomena, intersect perfectly.
Really?
And there's a lot of theories about that. I've got my own as to what's going on.
Can you talk about that? What is your theory? That's interesting.
Yeah, this is how I actually got involved in Bigfoot. Because, I've been interviewing people about UFOs for many years, which led to interviewing people about ghosts and near-death experiences and psychic experiences. And I was basically trying to figure things out because it was clear there was a connection between a lot of these things. And then one day, a gentleman by the name of Robert Murphy calls me, a radiologist from Canyon Country in Southern California. And if you know Canyon Country, this borders the Los Angeles National Forest, which is a huge wilderness area. Yes, it's next to LA, a giant population center, but we're talking about 650,000 acres of wilderness. It's massive. So Robert Murphy calls me up and says, well, I've got a story for you. I had this UFO land in my backyard. And I figured out where he lived, which is right bordering on the forest there in a pretty remote area. And he described this blue and white lights, this object landing on the ground and then taking off fairly quickly. And I thought that was going to be the extent of his story, but he was not done. He described the next night having a Bigfoot encounter in this same exact area, the very next night. He says his dogs were going crazy, and he had a telepathic link-up with what he perceived to be a Bigfoot. And it started roaring. And he said this thing roared in a manner that was unlike any creature that he was familiar with. It echoed in his chest. It had high tones and low tones, and it was obviously coming from a creature with an enormous barrel chest, and just wasn't a bear or a cougar, which is the only other things it could be in that area. And it was angry with the dogs. You could tell because he was telepathically linked up to it. And it knew he was observing it, and vice versa, of course. And eventually it moved off, went away. We went there the next morning and found footprints, or what appeared to be footprints. They weren't great. But this was my first Bigfoot UFO case, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. I did get others. I started reading about it and researching it. But wow, this is really odd. Because having researched UFOs for many years, most people who have a UFO encounter or an ET encounter aren't going to see Bigfoot. And the same is true vice versa. Tens of thousands of people are reporting Bigfoot. And most of them don't have a UFO connection. But there's this residue of cases, like Robert Murphy, where they intersect perfectly. There's Pennsylvania in particular has 20, 30 cases alone.
Wow.
And so I started collecting them and looking into it, and I'm trying to figure it out. The main theory that most people raise is, oh, well, Bigfoot's an alien. Bigfoot is extraterrestrial.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that. Because Bigfoot's been on this planet for a very long time. We know this. This is very much established. And so there's a lot of speculation that, maybe Bigfoot was some sort of parapsychological creature, interdimensional. And I'm not so sure how useful it is to look at it that way, because we're all interdimensional. We all have an interdimensional aspect to us, a soul. Psychically developed people can display all kinds of paranormal activity.
Yes.
And I think we're dealing with a flesh and blood creature, because it does leave hair samples and foot samples, and it stinks to high heaven. And my main theory is that what we're dealing with is, in fact, a sentient being, very much like humans in a lot of ways, different, obviously, but one that is intelligent and in many cases very psychically developed, and is in contact with ETs, as many humans are. So what we're seeing in these mixed motif cases are Bigfoot UFO contactees, because there are cases of these guys coming out of UFOs.
Wow.
People see that, or going into UFOs. I found a case in Colorado where a guy had a UFO land on his property. He ran up to it. There were human-looking ETs, grays, and there was a Bigfoot with them.
Interesting.
So, and there's a lot of cases like that, actually. So I think that's what the connection ultimately is.
Wow, fascinating.
What are some of the... excuse me. What is the most extravagant Bigfoot and human contact, friendly contact that you can think of, where they actually were trying to communicate with each other and associate in some way?
Oh, there's quite a few cases in literature. There's a guy by the name of Kawani Lasparitis who's written books about his lifelong relationships with ETs, where he's basically made friends, Bigfoot, where he's essentially made friends with them, has learned some of their language, has communicated psychically with them. And there are a number of people who claim this within the Bigfoot community, that they have developed a relationship. There are many, many cases of people setting out apples and fish and foods, produce, vegetables in their yards or along their fence or on a picnic table. And Bigfoot will take it and sometimes come back and leave rabbit skins or rocks and crystals or other gifts back. So there's an actual trading going on. There was one case I know which took place, it was somewhere in the Midwest, I believe. But it was interesting to me because these people had a Bigfoot outside their house. They saw a look in the window once, and it was very friendly for the most part. So they started leaving fruit on the picnic table outside their house. And they would do this regularly and would always disappear. And one time they just didn't do it. And the Bigfoot came and it was angry, started pounding on the walls of their house, scared the daylights out of them. They can be quite aggressive at times. So like wild creatures, there are some recommendations from naturalists: don't feed wild creatures. They need to feed themselves. So I think there's, a lesson there. I think in some cases it's fine, but maybe not always.
Well, it's such a vast expanse between psychically developed and then the aggression because you didn't leave fruit out and they don't bathe. There's a big gap there. So that's so fascinating.
Yeah, well, this goes to speak towards the many different types there are. And if you look across the world, the different reports, you will see there are reports of these hominids, homonyms, primates, wild men, of many, many different types. California, I concentrated on because, that's where I was basing my research. And they have the most reports of any other state in the United States in terms of just the number of them. And the California Bigfoot, usually called Sasquatch, is quite tall. And we're talking 8 feet, 7 feet. I mean, there are reports of 5 and 6 foot. There are reports of it going up to, 10, 11 feet, and a few outliers, 12 feet, not much higher than that. But this is all across the United States. In Florida, they were often called skunk apes. But Australia have them. They call them the yowie. Asia, they call them the almas. Africa, there's different names in all these areas. I mean, North America has 30 different names for Bigfoot, honest to God. But Africa, they call them Muhalu and Ufiti and Kikumba. And in the Philippines, they've got them as well. Orang Gugu, they call them. Scotland, the big gray man. Duende, South America. Tibet, of course, has the Yeti. Yeah, that was one of the real publicizing of this unknown primate. And some do think that some of them, at least, are not sentient and are just essentially unknown primates, which is certainly possible. I mean, we didn't even realize that there were these giant gorillas until, what was it, 150 years ago or so, less. I'd have to look that up. It wasn't that long ago that the giant mountain gorilla was accepted as the main, species. So people think, oh, no, they could not exist. We would have known it by now. Well, one, we do. We do know it, if you look into it. But two, most of human population is clustered in cities along shorelines. There's much of this world that is really vast wilderness. And yes, it's been explored. But Jane Goodall, very prominent naturalist, primatologist, says, I absolutely believe in Bigfoot. And if you look at a lot of the people who are out there in the field exploring, they will express their belief in Bigfoot and share their encounters.
Interesting. So Donna, I think your question may have been answered, but her question, Preston, was, what's the difference between Sasquatch and Yeti? And you just said all those names. So is it just different names for the same being-ish? No.
I think what we're looking at, look at humans. We have enormous variation. We are all one race. We know this. But we do have variations in ancestry in terms of, this person is Asian, or this person is Latino, or this person is black or white, or what have you, Pacific Islander, whatever name you want to put on it. It's all essentially the same genetics, but it dials out differently. There's what we have, it's what we call ancestries. And we see this exactly with the Bigfoot. And I think some of these is even more pronounced because we're looking at some that may very well be what we would think of as Neanderthals, which is always thought to have gone extinct. But I'm not so sure because we have the little pygmies in Africa, Watusis, who are 7 feet tall. This is just humans. And this is what we see with the Bigfoot and the Yeti and the wild men. They are very different sometimes. Often they are described as having a very human-like face, the Bigfoot and the Sasquatch, but not always. Some describe hairy faces, but some will describe red-colored, white-colored, black-colored. Some have short hair, some have long. You mentioned the odors. Do they bathe? Well, yeah, they do, but some don't and seem to be carrion feeders, or there's speculation about this. Skunks and so forth are able to have a gland that emits an odor as a defense mechanism. And if you look into the reports, surprise me. Yeah, if you look into the reports, smelly Bigfoot are relatively rare. A lot of people see a Bigfoot walk by and they don't smell this powerful odor, but some do. So there's some speculation as to whether this is a byproduct of them just not bathing and rolling around in carrion, or is this part of their physiology itself?
Yes. Yes.
I don't know, but I have talked to people who've smelled Bigfoot, and it's not nice. I mean, one lady, she gave such a vivid description. She was the one who actually, I ended up having my own encounter, but she was having an encounter, and boy, she described it vividly, the smell.
The difference is, that doesn't surprise me. Look at us. We got people of different color. We got people, small ones. Now, the pygmies, they don't hardly ever make it much beyond, above 3 feet tall. And then you have the Maasai in Africa. None of them is less than 7 foot tall. They are very tall people. So, so we have differences. Why shouldn't they have differences? So I have no problem with that at all.
Yeah, and it's because of the geography and where they grow up and how the environment affects them, and sort of, the same way we see here. So,
in fact, there's a really interesting story, and if you want to see it, go to Broadcast Team Alpha. Down in the videos, I did a video on a Bigfoot that was, there was a fire, a forest fire up in Nevada. And there was a huge area that was burning up. And out of the woods, out of the fire, there was a Bigfoot coming up towards the firefighters. He was about 7-some foot tall, and he had third-degree burns just about everywhere. And he came right up to them, and he sat down on the ground, and he needed help, obviously. That's what he was asking for. And they put him on a gurney, and his feet was hanging off the edge of it. And, these gurneys are pretty long. And there was a Native American firefighter there, a girl. And the Bigfoot, he kind of took liking to her. He wanted to hold her hand. Kind of felt like there was some similarities between the Native American girl and himself. So he trusted her more than he trusted the others. And this is a very interesting little video that you can watch on Broadcast Team Alpha.
That's fascinating. I haven't heard of that. In some ways, it doesn't surprise me. The Native Americans had a relationship with them for a very long time. They know about
the firefighter told the story, and it was written up in the newspaper up there.
Amazing. Yeah.
So talking about lineage, Donna asks, do we know how long they live?
No, that is a great question. And I can't say that I have any good reporting on that. That is not a question I've really looked into. So I could not answer that with any real authority. I suspect it's similar to human lifespan. But what's really interesting is people always say, why isn't there a body? Because we find bodies of other animals, but often we don't. And out in the wilderness, as any person who's a rancher or anything will knows, anything that dies does get consumed or deteriorates quite quickly. But we're dealing with a species which is likely intelligent, who takes, like humans, takes care of their dead.
Yes.
And people don't see human bodies everywhere, although there's a lot of people dying. It's because we dispose of our deceased ones. And the speculation that's going on here is that this is exactly what Bigfoot do.
Interesting.
Or they could be interdimensional to do.
Sorry.
Or that they have ways of disappearing the bodies, so to speak.
Shapeshifters, or?
I'm not sure I would say that. Moving it up into the astral dimensions in ways that we don't have the ability to do. Because if you look into the enlightened masters, say, up in Tibet, in India, and all over the world, frankly, people do have the abilities to do things that would seem absolutely supernatural, but aren't. Yeah. These are natural human abilities, just elevated to a degree that we don't understand the mechanics of it here in mainstream science. But people can levitate, turn invisible, teleport, and do all kinds of things.
Yes.
And these beings apparently have these abilities. I did talk to a gentleman who had an encounter in the Sierras where a Bigfoot appeared in front of him, not stepped out behind a tree, appeared like out of thin air and startled him.
I guess so.
Yeah, the female Bigfoot appeared and basically had a telepathic communication in thin air. And they said, yes, we have this ability. We do have families. And then they showed a little Bigfoot. So it was a Bigfoot family. He communicated with them. And he's like, I don't tell people the story because they think I am nuts.
That's perfectly timed, Preston, because Margaret asks, do you think that they're like mammals and give live birth?
Yes, there are accounts, very few scattered accounts of people witnessing. There was a lady up in Mount Shasta who had a little cabin, or a little trailer rather, out in the wilderness on the foot of Mount Shasta. And if you know Mount Shasta, it's all about Bigfoot. Big population in Northern California and that whole area, Oregon, Washington. And she saw a female Bigfoot give birth to a baby.
Wow.
She says it took an hour, and she just calmly watched it from her porch. There are a few cases of that. Many cases of people seeing female Bigfoot carrying a baby or a little baby lodged up in a tree. So yeah, there are baby Bigfoot. And if you look at how these things behave, for the most part, they're loners. These guys do have families, but what we see is them basically out on their own. They're generally speaking nocturnal and don't live in large groups. Though that's not always true. There are many cases of Bigfoot families.
Mm-hmm.
And Donna asks another question. Do you think they live in homes? Homes, like we have homes?
Right. No. They don't construct, very intricate structures. They're more like, there are indigenous peoples throughout the world who live in crudely constructed huts, very much like the Native Americans had teepees, which they could pick up and move. And once they'd exhausted the game and the food from a certain area, they'd pick up and move. And what we do see are crudely constructed Bigfoot nests. And there's quite a bit of this on the internet. And it's really cool because if you look at these things, it's amazing. These are constructed in ways that would be very difficult for humans to do, breaking down quite big branches, bending them, and curving them into these really crudely constructed nests, or I won't call them huts, but you can see that this was absolutely artificially made. It's not a natural thing. And many reports of them living in caves as well. So that is not at all unusual. But that seems to be mostly how they live. They will find a little burrow or construct a nest, or they have caves that they live in, and then come out and hunt at night. And they're so aware. I mean, they have enhanced abilities in terms of, we know that animals generally often have much better hearing or sense of smell than humans.
Yes.
And it appears that these Bigfoot do as well. So people are like, why aren't they see more? Well, they can smell you coming. They can sense the secondly coming. They can hear you. They are masters of walking in the forest, and you will never know they're there. And there's case after case of this, of people camping out, and they're in thick forests, and a little rock will come sailing at them and hit the tree. Sometimes it's not a little rock, it's a big one, something that no one can throw. And they're basically territorial in many cases, and they will give you the message loud and clear. This is my territory. Get out now.
Wow.
And it scares the living daylights out of people.
Yeah.
Cases of this, and people don't see them. They hear them tromping around. I just talked to a guy. He sort of cornered this Bigfoot in the copse of woods, and it was open on all three sides. And he knew it was going to cross. And as soon as he got to that viewpoint, it turned and went to the other direction. Finally got by, and he never saw the darn thing. It had raided his garden. This is in upstate New York. Ate all the pumpkins and all the squash, and didn't like the peppers. It put those aside.
Interesting.
And the reason was because there was this cornfield that was normally, cultivated each year, but the farmer didn't do it that year. And so the Bigfoot had no food source, or his normal food source was gone, and he started raiding the people's gardens in this neighborhood. The gentleman I interviewed was not the only one who's like, my garden has been ransacked.
Wow.
He found evidence as well and heard it rushing through the brush, but never actually saw it. It evaded. It did not want to be seen. And they can do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Yeah.
So let's, we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to save some time and hear about your newest book, if you guys are ready to maybe take another path. Are you satisfied, Augie? Yeah, you good? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us.
Let's hear what's in it.
Yeah, I'm on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, thanks, Nori. Thanks, Augie, because I did want to talk about my latest book, which just came out a few months ago. It's called Not From Here, Volume 4. And in this series of books, I'm so excited about, because in these I explore the lesser known types of UFO cases that have really unusual patterns, cases that I think some researchers are a little bit afraid to touch, ones that haven't gotten a lot of attention or coverage or exploration. And this latest book absolutely reflects that. I've got 10 different chapters, each focusing on a different pattern of UFO contact. For example, Chapter 1 talks about UFO car lift cases. And this is so unusual. And I think even within the UFO community, a lot of people don't know about this. But UFOs are known for chasing cars down highways. They seem to have a penchant for doing that. But sometimes this goes a step farther, and they will lift your car up off the road and carry it for a few hundred yards, a quarter mile, a half mile, a mile, even 6 miles in one case, just above the road. We're talking anywhere from 3 feet to 6 feet, a little bit higher, but not usually much higher than that. And these aren't people being taken on board or anything. This is just a display of a very in-your-face, hello, we're real. You are never going to forget this, will you?
Wow.
And then they set the car down. It's outrageous. It's so amazing. And I've discovered this when I was writing UFOs over Nevada and ran into 3 cases in a row. I thought, wait, I've got my own case. And I started, connecting the dots in my mind. I'm like, oh, there's another case here. And I collected like 20 cases all over the world, reaching back decades up to pretty much the present day.
Are the ships invisible? Can other people observe the ship lift the car? Has anybody observed it? That's my question.
Oh, well, certainly the people who are driving or inside the car, yes. From an outside vantage point, rarely. It does happen. There was a very famous case in 1988, which did receive international media coverage. I mean, it was a huge case where the Knowles family, Faye Knowles and her 3 sons, who were, 18, 20, and 21, I think, thereabouts, were driving across the very remote Nullarbor Plains of southern Australia and saw a UFO chasing another car, actually. And they pulled a U-turn and started to investigate. And this UFO stopped chasing that car and started chasing theirs. So they pulled another U-turn and took off. This thing, and long story short, came down on top of the car and lifted it up, carried it for an undetermined, not very long, a couple of hundred yards, and dropped it down. The car blew a tire. There were dents in the hood. It was a big, big case. They did go public. And later it was discovered that there were outside witnesses who did not see the car actually get lifted up, but did see a UFO in that area at that time. So presumably it was the same one.
Wow.
But yeah, most are not observed by outside witnesses.
Interesting. And what do you call that chapter? I didn't get that.
Those are UFO car lift cases.
Car lift cases. Okay. All right.
Yeah, but all kinds of really interesting stuff. Like I covered cases of people who see UFOs on, get this, this is funny to me, the 4th of July. And I always thought, people are seeing fireworks, right? That's what you're seeing.
Yeah.
No, these are UFOs that come down to watch the fireworks.
Oh my goodness.
And I mean, we're talking saucer-shaped craft. Sometimes people are seeing humanoids looking out through the windows. And sometimes they will put on a display that's far better than the fireworks show itself. Like, you want a show? We'll give you a show. So those are unusual cases that don't get a lot of coverage. But yeah, I got a lot of them. UFOs that crash into planes or cars.
Oops.
Got a bunch of cases of that. UFOs not only hovering at airports, but landing on runway.
Really?
Humanoids coming out. Yes, this is absolutely a thing.
I love it.
I did a chapter on the fertilizer ET connection, which is weird, but there is one.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Or ETs that teach people how to levitate. Because I interviewed, you guys interviewed her, I think, Dolly Safran.
Yes.
She reported this. And I asked her about it specifically because I'd heard this happened to Whitley Strieber, who's very well known in this field for being a contactee. I knew Bud Hopkins had a case, Jacques Vallée, very well-known researcher, and dug deeper, and I found a lot of cases of people who levitate following a UFO encounter. This is not the UFO lifting them up in a beam of light.
Yes.
This is them having a psychic ability that has been ignited or enhanced or woken up, and they're spontaneously levitating.
Wow.
It's amazing. So yeah, these are some of the chapters I'm covering in this latest book.
Wow. Right.
Do you have any thoughts about ETs underneath the water, beneath the seas?
Do I? Oh yeah, they're there.
They are.
Certainly, USOs have not gotten a lot of attention over the decades until recently. The first person to really look into it was Ivan T. Sanderson back in the 50s when he wrote a book, Invisible Residents, and mentioned that, guess what? There's USOs as well. I'm not sure if he used that name or not, but we call them USOs, unidentified submersible objects, because clearly they're not UFOs. Yes. But they are the same thing. I mean, this is a UFO. It's just under the water. And yes, I started getting cases very early on in the late 1980s and started cataloging them off the coast of Southern California, which turns out to be a hugely active area for USOs. One of the top 10 in the world, easy. But after really focusing on this and going on TV and writing a book about it, Undersea UFO Base, I got a flood of cases. I mean, there's a case at Lake Hamilton in Hot Springs, Arkansas, a really interesting USO case. Another from a submariner on the East Coast who had one track his submarine. He was an electrician's mate on the submarine. But one at Lake Miccosukee in Florida, a couple in the Bahamas, all over the world. USOs are absolutely in our oceans, rivers, and lakes.
Interesting. Fascinating.
I have seen a picture. Yeah, go ahead, Nori.
No, you go.
I've seen a picture from something off the coast. I believe it was off the coast of San Francisco, a few miles out into the ocean. There's supposed to be a square opening into something, and there's a lot of UFO activity in that area. They see ships coming out of the water. Have you seen about that?
I can't say that I have, no. Yeah. I know there's really interesting photographic cases, and I do think that they do come in and out of the water, for sure. I mean, I've got cases reaching back to the 1920s, personally off the coast of Southern California. But Columbus, the Nina and the Santa Maria, during his trip to the New World, so-called New World, he and his crew saw a USO, and it's very well described in their ship logs. It's one of the earliest reports of USOs. It's all over the world, these USOs.
Yes, interesting. So what else is in your book? Now I'm curious.
Oh, it's very, very cool. I did one chapter, I call it Those Damn UFOs. And when I say that, I mean DAM, where they are hovering over dams, landing. Humanoids are being seen. I've got cases where people have physically fought with the Greys. So they're punching and kicking and biting and fighting with them. And you don't hear a lot about these cases, but there's enough where this has happened.
Wow.
Some really cool stuff. I think one of the most interesting chapters, I did a whole thing on this on my YouTube channel, was extraterrestrial hitchhikers.
Oh my goodness. No way.
Yes.
Wow.
I remember reading one of R.D. Six Killer Clark's books, and she had this case of a Native American who was driving along through Window Rock, Arizona to Chinle, Arizona. It's a 1-hour trip. It's extremely remote. This is Arizona, and it's just desert out there. And he came upon this guy standing alongside of the road asking for a ride. And so thinking it's another Native American, and Dakota, the main witness, is Native American, said, I'll help this guy out. We take care of our own, so to speak. And let this guy get in his car and notice, well, this guy's not wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He's wearing a white shimmery jumpsuit, and he's very fair-skinned, and he's got this light, very hypnotic blue eyes that are different.
Wow.
And long story short, they drove along and came upon a landed UFO in the center of the highway. And Dakota pulled on board. This is one of a dozen or so cases that I found all over the world, by the way, where people stopped, sometimes not of their own free will. They felt compelled to stop, and they pull someone, take someone on into their car who is a little bit different.
Oh, yeah.
It'll lead to an onboard encounter. Not always. Sometimes they just want to ride.
Wow.
Very interesting. And so
that
unusual.
Sounds like I would love to have a hitchhiker like that. And I think we started about 5 after the hour, so maybe we have time to talk about something that I mentioned before we got on the air. There is incidents when people in years past at the drive-in movie theaters, they were watching the movie and suddenly they found themselves a 20-foot wide circular ship flying over the movie theater, shining into the cars and scaring the daylights out of people. And then they hang around for a few minutes and take off. I know you talked about that before, and this is so fun or interesting to hear about.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. UFO researchers have long realized that sometimes UFOs will put on a display. It's a type of behavior where they're very brazen. They clearly want to be seen. We see this with schoolyard encounters, which I did write a book about, where they come down over schools and show themselves off to large groups of children and teachers. And when writing UFOs over Colorado, I ran into this case where a UFO hovered over the Mile High Theater in Denver. A Dr. Zhivago was playing, and it kind of just showed off. I'm like, wow, that's interesting, because I have my own case, which occurred at the Paramount Drive-In Theater in Southern California, where a UFO dropped down right next to the screen, was metallic, was almost as wide as the screen itself, chrome like silver, making a low whooshing noise, and was watching everyone watch the movie. And in that case, it kind of scared a lot of the people there who fled. Main witness did not. Some people find this very interesting, are just fascinated. And doing research for UFOs over Colorado, I ran into 3 cases in a row. And I'm like, wait a second, we have to look into this? And I found, Augie, get this, 100 cases, stretching back to the 1940s, all the way pretty much up to the present day. There are still drive-in theaters, and there are cases that are, I think the most recent was 2019, that I found. But really the heyday was the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and somewhat the 80s. Mm-hmm. And they will put on a show for you. They absolutely are doing this intentionally. They will stay there a long time. It's a very low-level sighting. They'll flash their lights. They'll release smaller craft. They'll do little darting movements. Stay there for 20 minutes, sometimes the entire length of the movie. There are 100 cases.
That's
we
amazing.
could talk about this for hours. I have so many amazing cases.
That's so the what do we call them? ETs or all right.
Yeah.
So they're wherever they are, and they're like, "Hey, it's Friday night. Want to go to the drive-in movie and scare some humans?" Is that how it goes?
I don't think they're intentionally scaring them. We being somewhat fear-based. I think they're basically following a mission of theirs, which is a publicity campaign to announce their presence. And it's very effective, because where else can you go and show yourselves to 100 people who are already very open-minded and somewhat of a very much, I won't say entranced, but,
kind of
looking at the movie and, watching it with open mind. And it's a great way to reach a group of 300, 400, 500 people in one fell swoop. And they would do it. There's theaters that have been visited again and again. There was a theater in Canada that was visited so often, they put it in their marquee. They said, "You want to see a UFO? Come to the drive-in. They might show up," because they kept showing up. This is in Canada.
I love it.
That's interesting.
Really cool.
So you mentioned your YouTube channel, and somebody in the chat room also mentioned it too. So what is the name of your YouTube channel, and where can people find your books? And tell us about everything, Preston.
Thanks, Nori. I do have a YouTube channel. I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's called UFOs and the Paranormal with Preston Dennett. I think if you just punch in my name on YouTube, you'll find it pretty easily. But I've put out well over 100 episodes, and having all kinds of fun with it. Because some people don't want to read or just don't have the time or prefer, visuals and stuff. So I think people will enjoy that. But my book, I do have a website as well. Again, just punch in my name, it'll take you there. I'm on all social media platforms. Well, a lot of them: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And you can find my books on Amazon. I'm super excited. They're doing pretty well. My book, Symmetry, with Dolly Safran, hit #1.
Woo, wow,
so
congratulations.
Really cool. So, recently I'm enjoying quite a bit of success with the books. So I couldn't be more pleased.
Oh, that's so wonderful. That's so wonderful.
Yeah. I'm very encouraged. People waking up.
Yeah, hallelujah. Augie, do you want to ask your famous question before we close?
Yeah, that would be good. I love this question because it gets us so many different answers. And the question is, Preston, if you could talk to the whole world and the world was listening, what would you tell them?
I would say have fun. Relax, leave fear behind, let love and truth guide your actions. But ultimately, we're here to have fun, to learn, and to enjoy our life. So that would be my advice. Have fun. That's why you're here.
I like that so much.
That's
Preston,
good.
thank you so much for being with us. I hope you'll come back in the not too distant future. There's so much to talk about with you.
I would love that. Thanks, Nori. Yeah, anytime.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about. And when you get a new book, let me know, and then we'll do another one.
Very cool. It shouldn't be long now. I'm working hard.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I hear. All right. Well,
thanks,
Nori?
everybody. Mm-hmm. Thanks, everybody. It's been a lively chat. You guys know how to reach Preston, and I'm going to have to go get your book, both of them now. Well, the two, right? The one with Dolly, about Dolly, and now your newest one. I have to read that. I'm very curious. So thanks, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Margaret, for the super chat. I saw that. Thank you so much. Very grateful. And thank you, Preston. It was really, really
this was interesting.
So great to have you here with us. Thank you.
Oh, good. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.
And as the saying goes, in the words